What kind of neighbor demands you die of thirst on your own land? The sun scorched the cracked earth of my Wyoming ranch, a relentless furnace that turned every blade of grass to brittle ash. My name is Ethan Caldwell, and I'd sunk every dime into these 200 acres, dreaming of a quiet life raising horses under wide open skies. But the HOA, yes, an HOA in the middle of nowhere, had other plans. Their president, Karen, a woman with a smile sharper than barbed wire, decided my plan to dig a well was unsightly and disruptive to the community aesthetic. Never mind that my land was miles from their manicured lawns, and their cattle empire relied on the same aquifer I needed to survive. They sent me a cease and desist letter, threatening fines I couldn't pay. I stood on my porch, the paper crumpled in my fist, staring at the horizon where their sprawling pastures mocked my parched fields. My horses were dropping weight, their ribs stark against their hides, and my savings were bleeding out faster than a cut vein. I wasn't just fighting for water, I was fighting for my life. The day the letter arrived, I drove to the HOA meeting, a dusty community hall packed with ranchers who looked at me like I was a stray dog begging for scraps. Karen stood at the podium, her pearls gleaming under fluorescent lights, her voice dripping with condescension. "Mr. Caldwell, your well would lower the water table and jeopardize our cattle operations. We voted unanimously to deny your permit." Unanimously. The word hit like a slap. I scanned the room. Neighbors I'd waved to, shared beers with, now staring at their boots or nodding along with her. My throat burned, not just from thirst, but from betrayal. I wanted to scream that my land was mine, that their cattle weren't my problem, but I held my tongue. I'd learned long ago that shouting at a wall gets you nowhere. Instead, I walked out, the doors slamming behind me, and drove home under a sky bruised purple with dusk. Back at the ranch, I sat at my kitchen table, the letter smoothed out before me, its words blurring as my mind raced. I wasn't a lawyer, but I knew enough about water rights to smell something rotten. Wyoming law said I could dig a well on my property for domestic use. HOA be damned. So why were they so desperate to stop me? I pulled out my laptop, the screens glow harsh in the dim room, and started digging, not into the earth, but into records. County filings, water permits, land surveys. Hours bled into the night, coffee going cold beside me, until I found it, a geological survey from 1998. The aquifer under my land wasn't just any water source. It was the primary vein feeding the entire valley, including the HOA's cattle operations. If I tapped it, their wells might slow to a trickle. Karen wasn't protecting aesthetics. She was protecting her empire. I leaned back, the chair creaking under my weight, and let the truth sink in. They weren't just denying me water. They were strangling me to save themselves. My horses whinnied outside, their desperate calls echoing in the dark. I thought of my father, who taught me to fight for what's right, even when the odds were stacked against you. He died broke, but he died proud. I wasn't going down without a fight. I grabbed my phone and called Jake, my old friend from the county surveyor's office. "I need a favor," I said, my voice low but steady. "Can you give me the full water rights map for the valley?" He hesitated, then agreed. By dawn, I had a plan, not just to get my water, but to make them regret ever crossing me. The next week, I hired a hydrologist, a wiry guy named Tom who smelled like cheap cigars and knew aquifers like the back of his hand. He confirmed what I suspected. My well wouldn't drain the aquifer, but it would force the HOA to rethink their overpumping. Their cattle operation was sucking the valley dry, leaving smaller ranchers like me to scrape by. Armed with Tom's report, I filed an appeal with the state water board, citing my legal rights. The HOA responded with a lawyer who looked like he charged more per hour than my monthly mortgage. At the hearing, Karen sat across from me, her eyes cold as the steel table between us. "You're new here, Ethan," she said, her voice syrupy with fake concern. "You don't understand how things work." I smiled, tight-lipped, and slid Tom's report across the table. The board members exchanged glances. For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. But the victory was short-lived. The board approved my well, but the HOA doubled down, slapping me with a $10,000 fine for non-compliance with community standards. They claimed my appeal was disruptive behavior. I couldn't pay it, not without selling my horses or part of the ranch. My blood boiled as I read the fine print, their words twisting like a knife. They thought they could bully me into submission, bleed me dry until I sold out. That's when the idea hit me, sharp and reckless as lightning. If they want to play dirty, I'd play dirtier. I wasn't just going to dig a well. I was going to turn their own game against them. I called Tom again. How much water can I legally pump? I asked. His answer was the spark I needed. By the time the sun rose over the valley, I was ready to strike. I didn't need a lawyer or a courtroom. I had something better, leverage. The HOA thought they could control the water, but they'd forgotten one thing. I was sitting on the heart of it. If they wouldn't let me live, I'd make sure they felt the drought too. The valley shimmered under the midday heat, the air thick with the scent of dry sagebrush and desperation. I stood on my porch, watching dust devils spin across my barren fields, my mind churning with the plan I'd set in motion. Tom's report was clear. I could legally pump up to 25 gallons per minute for domestic use, enough to keep my horses alive and my ranch afloat. But I wasn't stopping there. The HOA's cattle operation relied on 3 massive wells, each guzzling water like a greedy beast. If I play my cards right, I could shift the balance, legally, quietly, and ruthlessly. I wasn't a vengeful man, but the thought of Karen's smug face crumpling as her empire faltered lit a fire in my chest. I started small, hiring a drilling crew to sink my well deep into the aquifer's core. The rig's hum was a hymn of defiance, vibrating through the earth as it bore down. Every day, I watched the crew work, their faces streaked with sweat and grit, while Karen's spies, neighbors who'd once offered me coffee, drove by, their trucks slowing to take note. I waved, my smile ablaze. They thought they could intimidate me with their glares, but I was already 10 steps ahead. By the time the well was operational, I'd installed a high-capacity pump, perfectly within my legal limit, but calibrated to draw water at the maximum rate. The aquifer was a shared resource, and I was about to remind them of that. The first sign of trouble came a week later. I was checking my horses when my phone buzzed with a text from Jake. HOA's main well is down to a trickle. They're freaking out. I grinned, picturing Karen pacing her pristine office, her pearls clicking as she barked orders. My pump was doing exactly what I'd hoped, pulling water faster than their overtaxed system could handle. Their wells, already strained by years of reckless pumping, were starting to falter. I wasn't breaking any laws. I was just using my rights to the fullest. But I knew this was only the beginning. Karen wouldn't go down without a fight, and I was ready for her. That night, I found a note taped to my mailbox, scrawled in sharp, angry handwriting. You're killing our livelihood. Stop now, or you'll regret it. No signature, but I knew it was her. The words didn't scare me. They fueled me. I'd spent too many nights watching my horses suffer, too many days scraping by while the HOA flaunted their wealth. If they wanted a war, I'd give them one. I called Tom again, this time asking about the aquifer's recharge rate. His answer was a gift. The aquifer was slow to replenish, and their operation was already on the brink. A few more weeks of my pump running full tilt, and their wells would be spitting dust. But then came the twist, the kind of gut punch that makes you question everything. I was out checking the well one morning when I saw a figure in the distance, small and hunched, moving through my field. It was Ellie, Karen's teenage daughter, her face streaked with tears. She wasn't supposed to be here. Karen had made it clear her family wanted nothing to do with me. Mr. Caldwell, she said, her voice trembling, please stop. Our ranch is dying. My dad's sick, and if we lose the cattle, we lose everything. Her words hit like a sledgehammer. I'd seen Karen as the enemy, a cold-blooded tyrant, but Ellie's eyes told a different story. Her father, Mike, was battling cancer, and the cattle operation was their only income. My fight wasn't just against Karen. It was against a family clinging to survival. I stood there, the pump's steady hum mocking me, and felt the ground shift beneath my feet. I'd wanted justice, but had I become a villain? Ellie's plea cracked something open inside me, a flood of doubt I hadn't expected. I told her I'd think about it, my voice rough, and watch her walk away, her silhouette swallowed by the dawn. I could keep pumping, dry them out, and win this war, but at what cost? My father's voice echoed in my head. Right ain't always easy, Ethan. I didn't sleep that night, torn between my rage and the image of a girl who just begged me to save her family. By morning, I made a choice. I wouldn't stop the pump, not yet, but I'd give them a chance to back down. I drove to the HOA office, the note from my mailbox crumpled in my pocket, and demanded a meeting. Karen was there, flanked by her lawyer and 2 board members, their faces hard as stone. "You're destroying us," she snapped, her voice venomous. "You think you're clever, playing with the water like it's a game?" I leaned forward, meeting her gaze. "You started this, Karen. You banned my well, knowing it'd ruin me. Now you're feeling what I felt. Want to talk? Or want to keep playing chicken?" The room went silent, the air thick with tension. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes, not just for her cattle, but for something deeper. I didn't know it then, but I was about to uncover the real reason she'd fought so hard to stop me. The HOA office smelled of stale coffee and desperation, the kind that clings to people who know they're losing. Karen sat across from me, her fingers drumming on the polished table, her lawyer's briefcase a silent threat between us. I'd come to negotiate, but the air crackled with something darker, a showdown neither of us could walk away from. "You're a selfish man, Ethan," she said, her voice low, almost a hiss. "You think you can bully us into submission?" I leaned back, my jaw tight, and tossed the crumpled note from my mailbox onto the table. "Threats, Karen? That's your move now." Her eyes flickered, but she didn't flinch. The lawyer started to speak, but I cut him off. "I'm pumping legally. You want to stop me? Take it to court. But we both know what'll happen if your wells run dry first." The board members shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between us. I could feel the weight of Ellie's words from that morning, her tear-streaked face a ghost in the back of my mind. But I couldn't back down, not yet. Karen's empire was built on control, and I was done being her pawn. "You have 1 week," I said, standing. "Approve my well, drop the fines, or I keep pumping until your cattle are drinking sand." I walked out, the doors slam, echoing like a gunshot. Outside, the wind carried the scent of rain that never came, and I wondered if I just signed my own ruin. That night, I couldn't shake Ellie's voice, her plea cutting through my resolve like a dull blade. I sat at my kitchen table, maps and reports spread out, the pumps I'm a constant reminder of the war I'd started. I thought this was about water, about survival, but Ellie had made it personal. I dug deeper into the HOA's records, chasing a hunch that had been nagging me since the hearing. Buried in a decade-old county filing, I found it, a land deal between Karen's family and a now-defunct mining company. They'd sold water rights to the aquifer for a quick profit, rights that were supposed to be shared with the valley's ranchers. Karen hadn't just been protecting her cattle. She'd been hiding a betrayal that could ruin her. The truth hit like a punch to the gut. She'd screwed over the entire community, and now she was using the HOA to keep it quiet. My well threatened to expose her, not just by drawing water, but by forcing a state investigation into the aquifer's overuse. I could destroy her with this, but Ellie's face kept flashing in my mind. I wasn't a monster. I needed a way to win without breaking a family already on the edge. I called Jake again, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest. "I need everything you got on that mining deal," I said. "Emails, contracts, anything." He promised to dig, and I hung up, knowing the next move would either save me or bury me. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. 3 days later, Karen showed up at my ranch, her SUV kicking up dust as she stormed toward my porch. "You're a fool, Ethan," she spat, her face flushed with rage. "You think you can blackmail me with old paperwork?" I froze. She knew about the mining deal. Someone had tipped her off. Maybe Jake, maybe someone else. My heart pounded, but I kept my face stone cold. "I'm not blackmailing anyone," I said, stepping closer. "I'm just done letting you run this valley like it's your personal kingdom." She laughed, sharp and bitter. "You have no idea what you're up against. Walk away now, or I'll make sure you lose everything." The air between us was electric, every word a spark ready to ignite. I could have shown her the documents, called her bluff, but something in her eyes stopped me, a desperation that wasn't just about cattle or money. "Why are you so scared, Karen?" I asked, my voice quieter now. "What's really at stake here?" For a moment, she faltered, her mask slipping, and I saw it. Fear, raw and unfiltered. Then she turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the dust, my mind racing. I didn't know it yet, but that moment was the tipping point, the spark that would set everything ablaze. By the next morning, the valley was buzzing. Word had spread. My pump was choking their wells, and whispers of the old mining deal were leaking out. Neighbors who'd shunned me started asking questions, their loyalty to Karen fraying. I stood at my well, the water flowing clear and cold, and felt a flicker of hope. But hope is a dangerous thing in a war like this. Karen wasn't done. She was regrouping, and I knew her next move would be brutal. I just didn't expect it to come so fast or to hit so close to home. The sky was a bruise of gray and gold when the sheriff's truck rolled up my driveway, its lights cutting through the dawn. I stepped onto the porch, my coffee mug still warm in my hand, as Sheriff Daniels climbed out, his face grim. "Ethan, we got a problem," he said, holding up a court order. The HOA had filed an emergency injunction to stop my pump, claiming I was causing irreparable harm to the community. Karen's name was all over it, her signature a taunt. My stomach twisted, but I wasn't surprised. She'd warned me she'd hit hard, and here it was, a legal sledgehammer aimed at my livelihood. I took the paper, my eyes scanning the legalese, and felt the weight of the valley's eyes on me. Word travels fast in a place like this, and by noon, everyone would know Karen was trying to crush me. I called Tom, my hydrologist, and we met at the diner in town, a greasy spoon where the locals whispered over pancakes. He looked over the injunction, his cigar-stained fingers tracing the lines. "They're bluffing," he said, his voice low. "This won't hold up. The state already approved your well. But they can tie you up in court for months, bleed you dry." I nodded, my jaw tight. I didn't have months or the money to fight a prolonged battle. My horses were barely hanging on, and the bank was circling like a vulture. But I had one card left, the mining deal. Jake had come through with a stack of emails, proof that Karen's family had knowingly sold water rights that weren't fully theirs, leaving the valley's ranchers vulnerable. If I went public, it could ruin her. That night, I drove to the community hall, where an emergency HOA meeting had been called. The room was packed, the air thick with tension. Karen stood at the front, her face a mask of righteous indignation, rallying the crowd against me. "Ethan Caldwell is holding our water hostage," she declared, her voice carrying over the murmurs. "He's putting our livelihoods at risk for his own gain." The crowd stirred, some nodding, others glancing at me with uncertainty. I stood, my heart pounding, and held up the emails. "Karen's lying to you," I said, my voice steady despite the fire in my chest. "Her family sold our water rights to a mining company years ago, and she's been covering it up ever since. My well's not the problem. Her greed is." The room erupted, voices shouting over each other, some calling me a liar, others demanding answers. Karen's face went pale, her hands gripping the podium. "That's slander," she snapped, but her voice cracked, betraying her. I passed the emails around, watching as neighbors read the truth in black and white. The mood shifted, the crowd turning on her like a tide. But then Ellie stood up, her small frame trembling, and the room fell silent. "My dad's dying," she said, tears streaming down her face. "We need the cattle to pay for his treatment. Please stop fighting." The air sucked out of the room, and I felt like I'd been punched. My victory tasted like ash. I'd exposed Karen, but at what cost? I left the hall, the weight of Ellie's words crushing me. Back at the ranch, I sat by the well, its steady flow a cruel reminder of the war I'd waged. I'd wanted justice, but all I'd done was tear open old wounds. The next morning, I turned off the pump. Not because I was giving up, but because I needed time to think. I couldn't destroy a family, not even Karen's, without losing a piece of myself. But I wasn't done fighting. I reached out to a lawyer friend in Cheyenne, someone who owed me a favor, and asked her to look into the mining deal. If I could prove Karen's fraud in court, I could force the HOA to back off without drying out the valley. Days later, the lawyer called with news. The mining company had gone bankrupt, but the water rights they'd bought were still tied up in a legal mess. If we could untangle it, the valley's ranchers could reclaim their share, and Karen's stranglehold would end. It was a long shot, but it was hope. I met with a few neighbors who'd read the emails, small ranchers like me who'd been burned by the HOA together. We formed a plan to petition the state, not just for my well, but for everyone's rights. The fight was far from over, but for the first time, I wasn't alone. The valley woke to a rare morning mist, the kind that clings to the earth like a whispered promise of rain. I stood outside the county courthouse, my boots scuffed from pacing, waiting for the hearing that could make or break us all. My lawyer, Sarah, had spent weeks building a case, piecing together the mining deal's paper trail with the precision of a surgeon. The petition we'd filed wasn't just about my well anymore. It was about every rancher in the valley, demanding the state reclaim the water rights Karen's family had sold out from under us. Inside, the courtroom was a sea of tense faces. Neighbors who'd once shunned me now sat beside me, their futures tied to the same fight. Karen took the stand, her composure cracking under Sarah's questions. The emails were damning, each one a nail in the coffin of her carefully crafted image. "Did you know the sale would impact the aquifer's sustainability?" Sarah asked, her voice calm but relentless. Karen stammered, her eyes darting to the crowd. "We needed the money," she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was for Mike's treatment." The room went still, the weight of her confession hanging heavy. I glanced at Ellie, sitting in the back, her face a mask of quiet pain. I wanted to hate Karen, but now I just felt hollow. Her greed had hurt us all, but her reasons were human, flawed, and raw. The judge called a recess, and I stepped outside, the mist cool against my skin. Ellie found me by the courthouse steps, her eyes red but steady. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice small. "I didn't know about the deal. I just wanted to save my dad." I nodded, my throat tight. "I know," I said. "This isn't about you." She hugged me, quick and fierce, then walked away, leaving me to wrestle with the guilt of pushing a family to the brink. But I couldn't stop now. The valley deserved better, and so did I. Back in the courtroom, Sarah presented the final piece. A state geologist report confirming the aquifer's overuse was due to the HOA's overpumping, not my well. The judge's ruling was swift. The water rights sale was deemed fraudulent, and the state would redistribute access equitably. My well was cleared, the fines dropped, and the HOA's grip on the valley broken. Cheers erupted from the ranchers, but I felt no triumph, only relief. Karen left without a word, her shoulders slumped, a woman defeated not just by law, but by her own secrets. That night, I walked my fields, the mist settling into the earth like a blessing. The pump was back on, its hum a quiet victory. My horses drank deeply, their coats gleaming under the moonlight, and for the first time in months, I breathed easy. But the win was bittersweet. I'd torn down Karen's empire, but I'd also torn open a family's wounds. I vowed to make it right, not for her, but for Ellie, for the valley, for the man my father raised me to be. The next morning, I drove to Karen's ranch, uninvited, my heart heavy but resolute. She answered the door, her face weary, no trace of the woman who'd once stared me down. "What do you want, Ethan?" she asked, her voice flat. "To talk," I said, not to gloat. I told her about the co-op I was forming with the other ranchers, a way to share water equitably, to keep the valley alive. I offered her a place in it, not out of pity, but because I knew hate wouldn't heal us. She didn't answer, just closed the door, but I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, maybe regret, maybe hope. I walked away, the weight of the fight lifting, replaced by a quiet determination to build something better. Spring came to the valley like a long-lost friend, the fields greening under a sky finally generous with rain. My ranch was alive again, the horses grazing contentedly, their ribs no longer sharp against their hides. The co-op was taking shape, a fragile alliance of ranchers pooling resources to manage the aquifer sustainably. We met weekly, hashing out plans over coffee and stubborn hope, determined to never let one person control the valley's lifeblood again. I become an unlikely leader, not because I wanted to be, but because I'd fought and won when no one else would. My well pumped steadily, a lifeline for my land, but I kept it modest, mindful of the balance we'd all agreed to. Karen's ranch was quieter now, the cattle thinned out, the operations scaled back. Word was Mike's treatment was working, but the cost had gutted their savings. Ellie had started working at the diner, her smile bright despite the shadows under her eyes. I saw her there one day, wiping down tables, and slipped her a note with the co-op's meeting details. "Your mom's welcome," I said, keeping my voice light. She nodded, tucking the note into her apron, and I hoped it wasn't too late for them to join us. I didn't forgive Karen, not fully, but I understood her. Survival makes monsters of us all sometimes. The valley was healing, but scars remained. Neighbors who'd sided with Karen avoided my gaze at the feed store, their pride bruised. Others, the ones who'd stood with me, shared beers on my porch, their laughter a balm for the long fight. I thought of my father often, his voice guiding me through the darkest days. He'd have been proud, not of the victory, but of the man I'd become, one who fought for what was right, even when it hurt. The mining deal's fallout had sparked a state investigation, and new regulations were in place to protect the aquifer. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were rebuilding. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the hills gold, I walked to the well, its steady hum a reminder of what I'd almost lost. I'd come to this land for peace, but I'd found purpose instead. The fight with Karen had changed me, taught me that justice isn't clean or easy. It's messy, human, and worth every bruise. I knelt by the well, the water cold against my fingers, and made a silent promise to keep fighting, not just for my ranch, but for every underdog who'd ever been told to sit down and take it. The co-op's first official meeting was held at my barn, a makeshift gathering of folding chairs and hopeful faces. We mapped out water allotments, shared costs for new monitoring equipment, and talked about the future, a valley where no one went thirsty. Ellie showed up, alone, her presence a quiet surprise. "Mom's thinking about it," she said, her voice soft but steady. I nodded, handing her a chair, and felt the weight of possibility. Maybe we could mend what was broken, not just the land, but the people too. The stars were bright over the valley, a canvas of light that made the world feel bigger, kinder. I stood on my porch, a beer in hand, watching fireflies dance in the warm night air. The ranch was thriving, the co-op a living testament to what we'd built from the ashes of conflict. My horses were strong, the fields lush, and the well's steady flow a heartbeat beneath it all. I'd won more than water. I'd won a community, a purpose, a home. But the victory wasn't mine alone. It belonged to every rancher who'd stood up, to Ellie's quiet courage, to the valley itself, resilient despite our flaws. Karen came to a co-op meeting a month later, her face lined with exhaustion, but her chin high. She didn't apologize, and I didn't expect her to. She signed on, her signature a small step toward redemption. We didn't speak much, but when our eyes met, there was an understanding. No more wars, no more secrets. The valley was ours to share, and we'd do it right this time. Ellie smiled from across the room, and I knew I'd made the right choice, not just for me, but for all of us. I thought of my father as I walked the fields that night, the earth soft under my boots. He taught me to stand tall, to fight for what's right, but also to know when to offer a hand. I'd done both, and though the scars of the fight remained, they were proof of something bigger, a life worth fighting for. The valley would never be perfect, but it was ours, and we'd protect it together. Under the endless Wyoming sky, I felt at peace, ready for whatever came next, knowing I'd never face it alone.